Director of Technology and Network Services Manager. Problems that we have in technology and some of the options used to fight it, and present what we've done at the Washington College of Law to fight spam and how it's helped us. And if you feel free, if you have any questions during the presentation, please stop me and I will answer them. And we can, even make this a free-for-all discussion if you'd like. Spam has become famous over the past several years because we use email so much. But in 1937, spam was famous for another reason. There was a company called Hormel, and they had developed a spicy ham concoction, put it in a can because of convenience and non-refrigeration, and voila. J.C. Hormel actually did, spam got its name because J.C. Hormel, who was president of Hormel, had a contest where he wanted to describe what spam was, and thus the name spam came. In its very first year of production, spam grabbed about 18% of the market because it didn't need refrigeration, etc. Now, over 65 years later, more than 6 million cans have been sold. But what else is spam? In 2005, spam is also unsolicited email. It's normally commercial in nature, has nothing to do with anything that we have anything to do with at times. It's what we call junk mail. The term spam, however, was adapted from Monty Python. How many of you are familiar with Monty Python? And in a skit where some Vikings sang this song. Have a cutie. I'm sorry. And I actually thank my boss, Corinne Munsterman, for finding that song for me. The United States is spam king, whether you know it or not. In 2004, we actually spewed out about 42% of the spam in the world. And the next guiltiest nation was South Korea with only 13%. So, as you can see with us, I guess because of freedom of speech and just a bunch of other things, we have that distinction. So, some of you might want to know how spam gained its breath. And I left that word misspelled. There are a couple of ways, actually. As we've had more web use, more electronic communication, and using those two venues to share thoughts and ideas, but also to make money. There's a book that was released in late 2004 called Spam Kings. It's by Brian McWilliams. It tells the real story about high-rolling people who use spam. How do many of you think spam started? And anybody? Advertising. It's very interesting. David Hawk, who is talked about in Spam Kings, actually didn't start out spamming to advertise. He started out spamming because he had created a white supremacist party in South Carolina. And what he wanted to do was to get his message across to younger people, but he realized that he needed to make money. And in order to make money, he did two things. He set up a storefront selling knives and swastikas and other things. But he also found that there were companies in China and in Russia that would pay him anywhere from 1 penny to 6 cents to bombard email accounts with information. So he actually took it on as a business venture. And there have been reported cases recently in Russia where there are still people in Russia that will pay us to bombard email accounts, etc. So in order to fight spam, there are some things that I recommend, being the postmistress at WCL. Use disposable email addresses. By that I mean don't use your email address for everything, because you never know where it's going to end up. Disguise or make your email address private when you're on lists or in news groups or forums or chats, because anybody can grab that email address and then use it somewhere else. Use a throwaway address if you own or maintain domains for the exact same reason as number one. Sometimes email addresses are harvested and you can end up on many, many ungodly email lists. And watch those checkboxes. If you ever go to a website and there are a lot of checkboxes and you put in your email address, sometimes behind there is a back-end process that's collecting that to be used for something else. There are various spam filtering levels, because this is one of the major ways that people fight spam. You have server filters, which are inbred with your mail software that's running on the server. You have workstation filters. As you know, Outlook even has its own inbred filter now. And then there's outsourcing. By outsourcing, you outsource with a company to handle your mail before it gets to you. So look for header information and information about the email that is characteristic of spam. Here are some links for spam filters. I did them at random because the list is very, very exhaustive. You know, I think if you do a Google search on spam filters, you'll get 1,000,001 hits, and that's an exaggeration. But as we've gone through electronic communication, the one thing that's becoming very, very evident is that spam filtering is a much needed tool. One of the things that we did at WCL is we've actually outsourced our spam. So I've also listed some spam outsourcing companies. What these companies basically do is any mail coming inbound to your server, they look at it first and then send it on to your mail server. For those of you that have affiliations with your main campus, this may be a little bit harder. For us, since we run our own mail server for faculty and staff, it actually proved to be very easy.
You got mail.
WCL's spam answer was the implementation of a product from a company called Postini. Why did we do it? In early 2003, being just at that particular time the postmaster at WCL and the Novell administrator, not having other duties as assistant director or network services manager, I probably got 10 emails a day from faculty and staff saying, you know, got something talking about porn, got something talking about Viagra, you've got to do something. And I knew that it was getting very serious when, walking down the hall, I'd run into Dean Grossman. He'd be like, Greta, what are we doing about this spam thing? So in mid-2003, we started investigating spam filters. We started investigating server filters. Though we had one on our mail server, it was not robust enough for the volume of mail that we were taking through. And we ended up feeling that outsourcing was the way to go, because I was spending hours upon hours every day modifying our filters on our mail server, yet not even catching a third of what was coming through. Because of that, the time constraint of the staff and losing the battle, we began the implementation of Postini in 2003. The reasons that we implemented Postini were it was easy to implement and easy to use. The administrator, which was myself, as well as some other members of the technology staff, could have control over a user account, and the user could control their own settings. There was no overhead on our mail server, so we didn't have to worry about additional traffic going through the mail server, thus crashing and creating a bigger problem for us, no mail. And a known track record, meaning we looked to see what other companies were using the service and if they were reputable. So when we implemented Postini, Postini basically gives you a management login screen. From this screen, what you basically do is create a dummy account, and you log into the screen, and it gives you access to what is called the administration console. This is only on the administration side. I'll show you a user view in a little bit. And from here, I can do a number of things. This is actually a snapshot of us from last night. If you notice, it tells how many spam messages it's quarantined within the past 60 seconds. Everything is done in increments of 60 seconds. It gives us a graph telling about the message and its composition, and if it was delivered, if it was blocked, if it was quarantined, or if it was spooled. Spooling is something that I'll talk about in a little bit that I think is actually a very cool feature of Postini. This is the user view. And as you can see, I don't know how many of you have a number of subdomains. We just have the one, wcl.american.edu. You can add subdomains if you're doing various organizations. If you have a clinic that has a special domain, and then you can test them right away. One of the things for those of you that are on the technical side that you have to do is modify your MX or mail record in your DNS server to point back to Postini. This is a view of some of our users, all of our part of our A users. And by clicking on each of these users, I can go in as the administrator and look at their account if they forget their password or etc. This service, they log on to outside of the realm of WCL. They actually go to a Postini server. This is the screen that we use to delete or add users. It's very simple. You type in their email address. At the bottom, click on Add. If you're moving between subdomains, you can move them from this screen. And remember, I told you a little bit ago that I would show you the individual user screen. As you can see, it tells you whether in inbound services the spam filtering is on or off, and then there are filter levels. Each of the little icons represents something different, like XXX is, of course, pornography. The little gift is special offers. You know how you get that if you sign up for 5 DVDs, you'll get one free. The two people talking are actually insensitive type, whether racial or sexist, and you can set them on or off. The thing you have to be careful with, and I've noticed, is sometimes if they're set too high, things that you actually want to get through, like for our DVC clinic, for example, won't get through. But then they can go through and add under approved senders and block senders other information. The other thing that we can do through Postini is to add special filters for various domains at the domain level. So if I have a group of people who are getting, say, a mailing from Technoids, for example, and it's blocked because it's considered bulk mail, for the domain, I just let it come through. Going back to the administration side is the connection manager. Under the connection manager, I can see various information about mail that's trying to reach our domain. It tells me if we have directory harvest attacks going on. It tells me if it's a spam attack. And again, this is all for the last 60 seconds. However, on the reporting tool, I can see over the past month or year or 2 years, because it's been about 2 years that we've had this implemented, what mail has been coming into us. I can also go in and manually block IP addresses if we're getting spam bombs that Postini is not catching directly because they're spoofing IP addresses. This is a sample of a directory harvest report from the 9th. And it gives you the IP address. It gives you how many messages were coming from that IP address. Now you can set the threshold higher or lower. If you know, for example, like our main campus sends us a lot of mail, I know the range of IP addresses it comes from, I can take them and exclude them from this rule. Just like with the directory harvest report, there's a spam attack report, and you can see what IP address it's coming from. The funny thing about this one is actually coming from one of our main campus IP addresses, and when I see stuff where I know where they're coming from because we do a lot of business, I'll send a message to our security folks on main campus and say, you know, I think we have a problem in X, Y, and Z dorm, and they'll try to track down the machine that the spam is coming from. Is everybody with me so far?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
What are some of the delays in the spam blocking and when you actually get the email? In other words, if you didn't have this protection, how soon would you get your email?
10 seconds. And you can actually, there's a tool, I'll point it out to you in a little bit, where you can actually do a loopback test to tell if you are having problems. One of the things, the delay, and they tell you up front, should be anywhere from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. The funny thing is, when we rolled out BlackBerries to our staff recently, I was wondering how long of a delay it would be, so I started testing from various accounts. My BlackBerry almost instantaneously gets any messages coming through, even though they get filtered through. The other thing that you can do with Postini is you can route all of your outbound mail through it as well. So you'll know that you're not bombing other people. I've actually turned it off because we were having a little bit of a problem with duplicate messages and we were trying to troubleshoot. So outbound mail right now has been turned off, but you can turn it on, it will. And if you look, when you manually block IP addresses, there is a drop-down menu where you can decide what error message or what action will be taken if a blocked message comes through. Most of them we block with error 554, transaction failed, but you can actually just dump the message and not even give an error message back to the sender. Okay, back to Delivery Manager. Delivery Manager tells me how much of my mail has actually gotten through. Again, it's in 60-second increments. It tells me the number of successful connections. When it talks about connections, it's the number of connections that's made from the Postini server to my server. It tells me the number of failed connections, which could signal that we have a back-end network problem. It tells me, to answer this gentleman's question, if you see, it tells the average connection duration. So that's about 2 seconds coming from them to us, and the average message size. And if you notice, there's system tests right down here. That's how you can test. You can do a trace route test or a latency test. The latency test is the test that you would do to see how long the entire loop is taking.
Just a follow-up, are you using a BlackBerry server to get...
We have 2 different models that we're testing right now. Some of us are using the American University main campus's BlackBerry server. I'm using actually my Singular. Okay. Spool Manager is actually a nifty tool. I love it because it never really appears that we're down. If I take the mail server down, I can spool mail to Postini and it just kind of sits there. We don't have any outbound service, but all of our inbound mail just kind of sits at Postini until I do my maintenance. It doesn't get bounced. It doesn't tell you, you know, your message was delayed. And you can buy space. As a norm, you get about 150 megs per post office. We bought a gig, and last summer when one of the hurricanes blew through, is it last summer? Yeah, last summer, and we were out of power in the entire building for about 36 hours. It's actually helped us a lot. Nobody missed any messages when we came back up because we had to take the entire data center down. And you know, I don't get any complaints anymore about, you know, why are you taking mail down? I was waiting on this important email message from this client or this other faculty member or whatever. I mentioned a little bit about detailed reporting. In here, I can see what type of traffic I have for the domain, for a recipient. If I get a recipient who's telling me, you know what, I'm not getting any mail, I can tell where his mail came from, you know. I can even track by viruses and tell what domain they were coming from. This is an example of 6.9 for us for inbound traffic. It tells how many messages we got, the total number of bytes, how many messages were forwarded, the percentage of messages that were blocked, etc. And for us, I used it initially as a justification tool while we were spending $7,000 a year, because there is educational pricing. These are some spam resources for fighting in education. Not every model is going to work for everybody. For me, as I said, it was very much a personal, selfish decision to go to Postini because I have so many other duties. It was just not feasible for me to spend 4 hours a day writing filters that were not working. Some of these resources give you other places that you can go, other models of rollout, implementation, things that you can do, etc. Anybody have any questions? This is where I hope that we would have an interactive discussion about what we found as we were fighting spam, some of the options that are out there, some of your questions, some of your stories about how you fight spam. Yes, sir?
We didn't touch on, or he did, I missed it, I guess, the blocking file extensions.
Yeah, you can do that inside Attachment Manager. Hold on. Okay, you can't see it on this screen. Oops. You can't see it on this screen, but right under manual IP blocking, you can block by file extension, you can block by name of file, you can block by header information in the message, the subject, like the one that we've been blocking by subject lately is Dr. N. Lucia Viagra pills. You can specify it. You can specify it for a group of mailboxes. You can specify it for all of your mailboxes. The blocking here is unlimited. And because I can either control you in a group, say that you're in the clinic group, I can just have you block it for a group, or I can block it by user, you as an individual, or for the entire post office. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to remind you about reminding users.
Oh. One of the things that we do, because we get a lot of users that call through the help desk, well, I didn't get a message from David, for example, and it had an attachment. We remind them at least once a month when we're doing web stat reminding to check their Postini if they don't know their password. Because the thing is, the password is not generated by us, it's a randomized password. Postini on their login screen has up where you click and you forgot your password. The message actually comes to me, but it'll send them back a password. And some people forget. I mean, we implemented the service in August of 2003, and people still forget that it's out there. You know, and typically if somebody says they've missed an email, it's because it's in Postini. Now, the one downside to Postini is it only keeps quarantine mail for 30 days. So 30 days from today, the messages that were received in quarantine are gone. So if somebody's looking for a message that they missed a month ago and they haven't checked their Postini, the message is gone. There's no way that they can get it back, which is kind of a problem sometimes, but that's one of the reasons we remind people so they can look. Typically, faculty members know during the school year to look because papers will get quarantined sometimes just because the header information looks like a piece of spam. The other thing that I should mention that Postini does for us is during all of the sober attacks and those attacks, we probably at most had 5 machines affected because most of them were stopped at Postini, which was also a wonderful thing because I think the last time there was a big attack before we got Postini, we had 100 machines infected out of about 300 machines. If we have 5 now, I think sober had a big attack about a month ago. We didn't have any machines that were affected. The other thing is if you try to deliver mail to yourself that is virus infected, it cleans the virus before it sends the message to you. If it cannot, it won't deliver the attachment to you. Yes, sir.
How much does this service cost?
For us, we have about 793 mailboxes. Now, let me explain that. The other thing you can do is relate mailboxes, meaning my account, Greta at wcl.american.edu, has a couple of aliases that are mailing lists or other accounts, the Postmaster account, the Comtech account, etc., Blackboard account, any account that I use for support. But for the 793 mailboxes, it's about $7,000 a year. There are educational discounts. If any of you would like to try Postini, and this is not a plug, it was just when I told our service rep that I was going to do this presentation, he's willing to let you guys try for 60 days for free to see if you like it. The thing that you have to remember is if you're going to try the product, you will have to make modifications to your MX records. Yes, sir.
While you were looking at this, did you look at any other products that were reasonably impressive, or?
We looked at another product by a company called Frontrich. One of the reasons I decided after testing them not to go with them, their service sucked. Pardon the bluntness of it, but I mean it literally sucked. You would call them up and ask them for help during the implementation, and nobody would call me back for 2 days. The other thing was there was no educational pricing, and you know, I was in corporate America before I went to academia, but most vendors realize the necessity and the value of having academic partners. And it was as robust a product, if not more so, but support is very important to me. Typically, when I have problems with mail, Postini responds almost immediately. The other thing is, even though, like I said, we were having a back-end network problem that was causing a mail delivery problem, it was not their problem, but they got on board with us with a conference call and spent time helping us try to track down why we were having a problem. You know, they just didn't say, it's your mail server or it's your network guy's problem. It was like, okay, we're on a team, let's try to do this and get the problem resolved. And for me, from a technical standpoint, that's very important as well. One of the other reasons I think we outsourced was workstation level filters require a lot of intervention from your users. And one of the reasons that we chose Postini was the user can be as active in this process or as non-active as they want to be. We can manage filters for them. If somebody calls us up and says, you know what, I'm getting a lot of mail from X, Y, and Z and I want to block it, I don't have to go to their workstation or tell them what to do. I can actually, if I know that it's one of my users that doesn't want to be active, I can manage those filters for them. And that, for me, was also very important. Questions, problems? Thank you for your attention and time. Sorry that it was so quick.